Welcome back to the history of everything, I guess. Before I get started, I need to address two elephants in the room. First of all, last week I did not make a hypothetical history video. Instead, this is what I'm doing right now. It's because I felt the need to take a break from the history content to address, again, historical issues regarding my home country, Greece, where because we're going to have our elections in 2027, a lot of people are falsifying information on the internet. They're creating issues out of literally non-issues, at least in my opinion. And there are people that are willing to lie through their teeth just so they can see their side win. And obviously, all while claiming some moral high ground. By the way, this is not a right wing only thing. It happens from both sides of the aisle. And I felt the need to address a couple of things that actually, concern me. And in fact, I would encourage, as many of you, to do it as well. You can see my video. Obviously, it's in Greek since I am addressing my fellow Greeks. But I also included captions in English. I mean, through YouTube. But they do a pretty good job getting my point across. The second elephant in the room is obviously this chrome dome right here. And no, I did not go through a Britney Spears-like episode. It's just that here in Greece it gets really hot during the summer, and unfortunately my barber had a stroke. He's fine. I mean, he's still alive, but he's recovering. So my wife and I decided to give myself a haircut. Halfway through, I just went like, you know what, just fuck it and buzz everything off. You can't tell because I'm balding pretty badly, but like, there's still some hair on there. Not much. I mean, I don't have that much to work with, but like, it's something. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you didn't click on it just so you could hear me talk about my country's many problems or the fact that I basically look like a bearded Lex Luthor. You came here to listen to me talk about the Battle of Vienna, or rather, hypothesize about what could have happened had there been a Christian loss at the Battle of Vienna. For a little bit of context, the Battle of Vienna happened in 1683 between the Catholic powers of Europe, namely Austria, the Holy Roman Empire, the Papal States, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Obviously, they're the GOAT as far as European militaries are concerned in this time. And Wallachia, who, by the way, was basically working as kind of a double agent of sorts that fought against a coalition of Ottoman Muslims and, surprisingly, Protestants. I will eventually be making a full-length video on the history of the Battle of Vienna, but long story short, it does tie to the Counter-Reformation, when basically the Catholic Church wants to counter the Protestant Reformation, namely Central European Calvinism, as it was spreading throughout Hungary, parts of Poland, Switzerland, and so on. And as a result, many Protestant monarchs and nobles would basically side with anyone who was against the papacy. The number one enemy of the papacy at the time was the Ottoman Empire, and as a result, many princes, especially in northern Hungary, would openly side with the Ottomans. Because eventually I want to get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I will say this, that basically the Ottomans came in with this gigantic army, and basically it was up to the Poles to save the day, otherwise all of Europe would be abstaining from pork and alcohol. Now, for this scenario to happen, two things need to take place. Either John III Sobieski never sends his famous winged hussars to fight against the Ottomans in Vienna, or he dies in battle, him and basically all of his forces. Regardless of which scenario you pick, certain things would definitely happen. First of all, Islam would expand drastically. And when I say drastically, I mean it wouldn't be so far-fetched to say that a lot more areas in Europe would be completely Islamized. For example, in our time, the only Muslim majority countries in Europe are Albania, Bosnia, and Kosovo, regardless, depending on who you ask about the nationhood and statehood of status of Kosovo. But regardless, these are the Islamic majority areas here in Europe. Now, let's say that John III basically fails to help the Austrian Vlach and Papal forces in Vienna. There's a good chance that parts of Croatia, maybe even parts of Hungary, would be completely Islamicized. That is because in our timeline, obviously, Hungary falls under the Ottoman Empire. So it's not that far-fetched to see the southern parts of Hungary, which were predominantly Catholic, even in our timeline, become completely Islamicized, since in the eyes of the Ottoman Empire, Roman Catholicism is the enemy, because Catholicism has a pope which can call on every other Christian to crusade against Islam, as it has done in the past. Obviously, if you know about the Council of Clermont, you will know that this was basically the kickstarting point of the Crusades. On that note, I also want you to focus a little bit right here on the current religious map of Europe. Now, a lot of this is something that we take for granted, and especially in areas of Central and Central Eastern Europe, this is largely a byproduct of the Counter-Reformation, either against Lutherans, Calvinists, and obviously occasionally the odd Hussite. Let's say that the Ottoman Empire expanded further into Central and Eastern Europe. This would be completely different, not only because there would be large Islamic communities as far north as present-day Slovakia, and basically, in my opinion, even parts of Poland, especially in the south, there would be a lot more Protestantism. By the way, I'm not saying this so I can tease my wife because she's a theologian that has a hate boner, for a lack of a better word, towards Protestantism, because she thinks that basically Martin Luther was an incredibly lazy theologian. Not so much Calvin, because he did base a lot of his writings on church fathers like Augustine. But yeah, there would be a lot more Protestantism, and it would probably form a lot more political alliances with Islamic forces, especially the Ottoman Empire. Another thing that, at least in my opinion, would probably have happened in this scenario would be basically a kickstart of the Russian Empire and the Russian Imperial Age significantly faster than did in our timeline. That would be because the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth would be completely weakened, especially after the loss of John Sobieski, which means that basically all of Poland, Lithuania, lands that belong to present-day Belarus and parts of western Ukraine, they would basically be free real estate, which means that the Cossacks would basically have nothing to do with fighting against the Muslims in Vienna and Central Europe. In fact, they would have to focus towards Russia, which basically because of their size, they would obliterate every single enemy that they would face, whether they would be Ukrainian Cossacks or the Polish, which means that it wouldn't be so far-fetched to probably even see Russia have some access to warm water ports and maybe forming a greater colonial empire than did in our timeline. Keep in mind, it did have a great empire in our timeline, but it was a land empire because of their lack of access to warm water ports, which, if you read enough history, you will know that they tried to avoid their geography and its limitations for the longest period of time. So it wouldn't be that far-fetched to see them have ports throughout the Baltic, maybe even have them create deals with neighboring countries that are basically anti-Catholic, like Protestant Norway. It wouldn't be so far-fetched to see them create deals for the use of ports and basically eventually forming their own overseas empires. In our timeline, the Barbary states, which were basically the North African client states around Morocco and Algeria, they basically would have to respect the new Protestant and Islamic alliance, especially if it would be fruitful in this regard. Keep in mind, in our timeline, the Barbary states did go as far north as Ireland and Iceland in order to get slaves, so they could sell them to the slave markets of the Orient. Now, in this timeline, they would have no reason to. In fact, they would probably focus most of their efforts towards Catholic Christians and Orthodox Christians, especially in the south, like in places like Greece and Montenegro and basically all across the Mediterranean. They would have no reason to get Protestant slaves in Northern Europe. Instead, they would just basically sell the existing Southern Europeans into slavery. Now, let's say that if the papacy manages to survive this entire ordeal in any way, shape, or form, obviously it would be in pretty bad shape. And it would call, again, as it usually does, on all forces loyal to the Catholic Church to basically fight against the new Islamic overlords, like they did with the Reconquista in Spain and Portugal. Now, there is a good chance that this would be the final blow for European Christianity in our timeline, because the papacy would have been already weak enough. The religious map would have changed even more because of the Barbary pirates, and the Islamic armies would be increasingly more powerful, especially since the Janissary system would still be in effect, meaning that a lot of children that were originally raised Christians, they would basically be taken and converted to Islam and become some of the most ruthless warriors for Islam against Christians. as I'm recording this, I can't help but think that, first of all, right now that I'm recording this, it's Monday night, and yesterday I had my best friend and the guy that was the best man at my wedding here at home, and we basically drank beer and had fatty meats, especially pork, because it's a meat that goes the best with beer. And I couldn't help but think that I take a lot of things for granted, especially my God given right as a Christian to have a beer and eat pork in peace without having some religious beliefs come over my head and go like, whoa, 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 haram. But yeah, these are my 2 cents on what could have happened. Obviously, I'm always open to suggestions about what could have happened, since all of these videos, they're based on hypotheticals, and I don't really think that there are too many wrong answers when it comes to these things. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all of the social media crap. If you really like my work, please consider becoming a patron of mine on Patreon, and I will see you on the next one.